Okay, I think this may be the first time we've ever done a webinar with the video on. And I think we all look gorgeous, of course. So I really hope nothing goes wrong. We're just going to keep smiling. Today's program I'm very, very excited about. It's the first in a series we're calling Lunch and Learn. And it's in partnership with VXI. And this is, again, part of IAOP's initiative to keep our members engaged, connected, sharing information we can use right now. And if you haven't seen it, and I do recommend you take advantage of it, there's a link right off our homepage to kind of our COVID-19 Resource Center, which will house this, house some of the other things we've done and what our members are doing to really be part of this IAOP member helping member initiative that I think is if anything good comes out of this I think is one of the most amazing things. And this particular session we're having today is one in a series of these Lunch and Learn sessions that we're doing in partnership with VXI. And Heidi Solomon, if you don't know her, get to know her. She's very dynamic and is doing just an amazing job pulling this together, these sessions together, the programming, everything else, along with our totally incredible, as you all know, IAOP team that makes this happen. So rather than waste any more time, I'm going to turn this over to Heidi so she can introduce the panelists and we'll be off and running. Thanks.
Awesome. So Debbie, thank you so much. I am having some challenges with my screen share, but anyway, hold on one second. But thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I know we have over 100 participants today dialing in from all over the world. And so I am so honored to be here. I think it's safe to say that this last few weeks have been amongst the most tumultuous and emotional times of our lifetime. At least it has been for me. And you know, the impact of the virus has been felt by people and companies around the world. I have been struck by the incredible resilience and ingenuity of people and corporations, and the response has been extraordinary, as much as for what it has required from our society as what it has revealed about people. Far from causing division and discourse, this self-imposed quarantining, social distancing, and forced remote work has allowed us to witness something profound. And that is the innate need for people to be connected with one another. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And so I am very excited to introduce our panelists. Mary Lewis, who of course, most of you know, the phenomenal Mary Lewis, who is manager of sourcing for Sprint, and perhaps new to the IAOP world, but not new to me, my dear friend and mentor, Tony Portman, who is the CEO of Walkabout, which is a new remote platform that's really transforming remote work. So thank you, ladies, for participating. Really appreciate you being here. So with this crisis, and I am really can't move my screen forward for some reason.
Click on your PowerPoint. Click on your PowerPoint. Do screen share. Click on your PowerPoint. Right
No,
now.
I did. Yeah, I'm sorry, everybody. Can you see it?
Not the PowerPoint, no.
Okay, so hold on one second. Sorry for the technical difficulties here.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Starting over. So there are the introductions, Mary Lewis and Tony Portman. So thank you again, ladies, for being here. So in with the crisis, we pivoted to remote work, as everyone knows. And what's been, I think, really interesting is the whole view of what remote work means and how it's viewed within a corporation has changed. Traditionally and historically, remote work has been more of a strategy, and now it's transitioned to being an imperative. There are many, many reasons why, and I know Tony and Mary are going to touch more on this, but of course there's cost savings, advantages, there's morale boosts that individuals, remote workers who have been surveyed prefer in most cases to be working work at home environments. And companies that offer work at home opportunities are viewed very, very positively, amongst workers, especially in the millennial generation. And of course, the productivity boost, which Tony, I know that you're going to dive into. So with that, Tony, let me just turn it over to you, and we can begin setting the stage and talking about what both you and Mary are seeing in the workplace today.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Heidi. And I think if you just go put it on full screen, yeah, there you go.
There we go.
So I'm thrilled not only to be, I would call it back in IAOP, but also to be reconnected with Heidi and to meet Mary. You're a rock star. And talk a little bit about how I've spent the last couple of decades. In my younger days, I was the CEO of a business process outsourcing company called Stream. I don't think a few of you probably remember it, but it's gone through iterations and iterations and acquisitions. But I learned a lot about and was a member of IAOP for years, learned a lot about how we engage people in this powerful conversation of e-commerce. And as you guys know, when you're either talking or typing with someone, the neuroscience of communication really matters. And in looking at some research before we built the company that we built, Walkabout, I was introduced by a fascinating guy, Robert E. Hall, that wrote a book, This Land of Strangers. What technology is doing to our homes, our communities, our churches. And by the way, this was well before coronavirus was ever even contemplated. And there's books out, the Google Brain. If you look at the neuroscience of what's happening in countries like South Korea, where technology, it's the most advanced technological country in the world. They've now coined literally a medical malady that some may say is as scary as coronavirus, called digital dementia. Because why? We don't have to remember things anymore, and we don't have to connect with people anymore. So I think that this is a wake-up call for all of us that have at our core every day the requirement to lead in a virtual world. And Mary, that's what you do every day. So what's happening right now is, I think, a phenomenon that must continue. To Heidi, go back to what you said about connecting people, connecting communities, connecting teams. And that is video first. Video first says you've got to be present, and you've got to be able to see not only what the person's saying, that's hearing it, but you've got to be able to see what they're feeling. I can tell right now, right? Mary's sitting there kind of thinking through. I can tell Heidi's eye contact. Here's what's happening neuroscientifically. 70% of all communication that's done face-to-face is nonverbal. It's right brain. So those of you that know about your brain know that the left brain is sequential. All of us in tech are sequential processors. Typing, texting, using technology is all left brain. And what clicks on when I'm now with Heidi and Mary is a right brain phenomenon. And in our right brain, it's where creativity is. It's where feelings exist. It's where empathy exists. And you guys have heard it forever because you're in this space. literally, if an agent smiles, they change their tone because endorphin, dopamine, and serotonin get excreted into the right brain hemisphere, and it literally changes the lilt in their conversation. So 70% of all your communication is left brain, and that only takes place with visual.
And so how are you seeing, Tony, that that's applying, you know, to this new remote workforce and, you know, as we're all trying to navigate through working at home, and now some companies are mandating video, right? Others aren't. You know, what are you seeing some of the changes? And Mary, I'd be interested in your input on that as well.
Mary, why don't you go first because you're in the trenches every day. How are you feeling and seeing this manifest itself?
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, depending upon your time zone. First of all, I don't know, I can't see myself, so I have no idea what you guys are seeing. I am connecting with everybody on my smartphone because I tried connecting on my PC and for some reason had problems with the Zoom platform. So the good news is that with a smart device, most of us can be connected visually very easily. So about 8 minutes before the start of this webinar, when it became apparent I was not going to be able to connect on my PC, I said, you know what? I've got my smartphone. It's got the Zoom application already loaded on it. So if you can see me, I don't know how much of me you can see, you'll notice two things, and that's actually the two colors I'm wearing. I'm wearing a magenta jacket and a goldenrod colored scarf because it's my homage to my just past and now my current and future companies. So as of today, Sprint and T-Mobile are now the new T-Mobile, and I'm very excited to be part of that. So I wore that combination specifically to kind of help put myself in the right mood. So as you mentioned, Tony, about being in the trenches, let me give everybody a little bit of a backdrop about Sprint, how we work, and some of the self-discovery things that I've learned either by happenstance or being forced into having to work a different way. So we have about 30,000 employees, predominantly a domestic company, although we do have locations, Sprint has locations around the world, but mainly sales offices and such. And where I am in the now former Sprint headquarters in Overland Park, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City, we have a large campus. It was originally built for 14,000 people. And so over the years, we've consolidated into basically a compact core area of buildings. And as many companies have done before us as well as now, Sprint is adopting an open work environment. And so when you take a look at working remote, for some people at Sprint, it was a way of life. I mean, that's their offices in their home. That's the way they have joined. That's the way they do their work. And those folks have had the advantage before us of having, of understanding what it takes to work remotely, some of the self-discipline you have to have, how to best connect, how to set up some rules and guidelines. And actually, I do have a checklist from one of our remote procurement team members, Lisa Coleman, and I'll be happy to share that with anybody who wants it because it's got a great list of tips. But for a lot of us, as we migrated to an open environment, it brought advantages as well as disadvantages. So the first advantage is that as a team, you see everybody. Everybody's all together, and it really helped with collaboration. We were able to quickly engage, quickly pivot, pull together a meeting at the last minute, and it was very good so that everybody could stay on top of things. The number one disadvantage, of course, is that there were no walls, and the fact that you're at your desk means that a lot of folks could approach you. And problematically is how do you can't put a sign up, you know, do not disturb, or I'm not in, regardless of the body you see in front of you. And so in that respect, several of, at least on my team in the procurement area, we have started working remote as a way of isolating ourselves so that we could get work done. And I'm very fortunate to work with Sprint because the policies and process were already there. So it was no problem to have a meeting. We typically join through Skype, and I would connect on my PC and listen in on my cell phone. And for me, it was almost a treat because I didn't have to get ready for work. I could, although I wasn't in pajamas, I was not exactly, you know, with the hair and makeup and all that good stuff. But there, now with the COVID-19 and the shelter in place, what became an opportunistic way of working is now an everyday, we have to change our paradigm way of working. And I, for one, was not prepared. I thought I was, but I was not prepared. And so as a result, and in the middle of all this, I don't know about everybody else, but I seem to have gotten every email about how to work remote, you know, the 6 steps to working remotely, how to manage a workforce that's remote. And I kept thinking, like, well, I already know how to do that. And at the same time, even though I was remote, the thing I yearned for the most, and I can't speak for everybody, but I'm betting a lot of you are in the same boat, is the feeling to be connected, the need to be connected. And when something's taken away from you, you don't realize what you have and how much you need it. And so as a result, we started doing more video, remote Skype calls. And I, for one, was quite shy and quite reluctant to join remotely and with video. And what I also have seen is a lot of the how to and the what with regard to working remote and how to work effectively remote. But I didn't understand the engagement. It was the why. And what Tony described, it's all of a sudden I had one of these like V8 moments where when she started describing about the how communications are and how you actually connect more visually, that for me became the why. So Tony, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the why, and then I can kind of jump in and say, here are some of the things that we're doing to help underscore the why and give a little bit more ideas about the how.
Excellent. So I love what you just said. And I think it's so honest and so real. You know, if you think about neuroscientifically, if 70% of our communication is that nonverbal, it's critically important. In addition, neuroscientifically, our brain is a big computer. So just like a computer, we've got a prefrontal lobe that's called a processor. And then we've got a hippocampus, which is our file cabinet where we put memory and we store things. And then our right brain is where creativity exists and where we've got expression and we've got nonverbal. And that connection that you felt you were lacking, you were getting it from all sorts of other environments, right? And now you don't have a choice. You now, those Skype meetings and death by Zoom meetings, it's like, oh my gosh, your head wants to explode. But I will tell you a couple of neuroscientific things that kind of point to the why video and why video first. Number one, it's the nonverbal. You can see Heidi getting very frustrated with her.
My computer's freezing.
And by the way, the use of our tool, I mean, think about it. Mary, God bless her, right, is on her cell phone because she couldn't get her PC, right? We're in tool mania. We are trying to go from meeting A to meeting B to meeting C. And if we stay video connected, a lot more is going on with Heidi. Go back to the last slide if you could, Heidi.
Maybe. Oh, there we go. It worked.
Good girl. But if you think about what's going on with this computer of ours, the computer goes on a point to point, just like the brain. And 50 billion neurons are going on in all y'all's brains right now. I will tell you the one thing that video causes, and those of you that are participants, unfortunately, you're not on video. If you are multitasking, it's very, very, very bad. By the way, women tend to multitask more than men, and it's terrible for your
Guilty as
brain.
charged.
So let me tell you why it's really bad. So if the brain's a computer, and if a computer goes point to point, every time you multitask with a different function, you're literally short-circuiting the connection. Men tend to do it less because they are more single-focused. Women sort of are proud of the fact that we multitask. It's very bad. In fact, there's early neuroscience research that says it might be a correlation, women multitasking, to the early onset of dementia and Alzheimer's. There's a higher preponderance of women that have those maladies, and there is a speculation hypothesis on correlation that says multitasking could be a cause. The second is being present. So I can't multitask if I'm paying attention to Mary and Heidi. And by the way, I'm talking, but even when I'm not talking, you know, we've heard a lot in leadership training about active listening. And active listening, I can tell Heidi's shaking her head and Mary's shaking her head and Mary's doing the smile thing. That part of communication is critically important. And the power of this conversation is going to turn itself into what Dan Miller, and I hope IAOP knows him, I love him. He coined this phrase about a decade ago called conversational commerce. And that is, our exchanges are actually really commerce exchanges. And what we end up communicating turns itself into either debits or credits on a very important relationship bank account. So I think as we work remotely, we're going to have to change the context of the way we work, the tools in the way we work. And I'm going to suggest that those of you that are out there, when you can, make sure it's video first for those reasons. So Mary, did that help highlight some of the why?
It does. Thanks, Tony. I have to admit that I was video shamed last week because even though we had the ability to connect with video, I was very deliberately not connecting because I thought, oh, you know, if I didn't have the hair all perfect and the makeup perfect, and you know, but what I didn't realize and appreciate was that I was not transmitting the message I was thinking I was transmitting was not being entirely received. If some of what I say and share is communicated with my nonverbals, and when you get the entire message, it's almost like having a radio, an AM versus FM radio. AM, which would have been that single channel, and FM, that multi-channel. You get a richer message, and especially, and it's made even worse if you are multitasking. So I was video shamed, and I'll be happy to say that once I started joining with video, just even in the last several meetings in the last few days, it has made a huge amount of difference. Now, some of the ways that we're looking to you know, to be a little closer. And again, this was, for me, it's a self-discovery. After I've reflected on it, the self-discovery had to do with how can we connect with each other and feel closer as a team. And I realized that the context I saw everybody was always physically in work, in the office. And if they joined remote, it was only because of maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and their voices on the phone or their IMs. So in one of my team meetings, I said, okay, let's do this. Let's take a picture of your workspace and take a picture of any helpers, AKA pets, that you might have. And we each shared the photos that we took. And to me, that was so important because I felt like I got to know more of the person because I saw their environment. And I also heard a little bit more about their pets and their just little personal things. And so that is another way to establish a connection when we're forced to be separate. So not everything is going to be video. I have a friend who's hosting a video happy hour tomorrow evening. We'll see how that goes. And I think we're planning on doing a video birthday party as well.
And you were doing a virtual high tea, right, Mary?
Oh, well, we had to reschedule that. So here's the yeah, my sister got called into her office. She's an essential person, in essential business. But we will redo it. And the idea was, I'm a tea nerd, total tea nerd, and I have to have my tea every day. And so I thought, how about if I connect with family by doing a FaceTime afternoon tea? So we put together basically the same, I did an invitation, we did the same menu, the same everything. I even set an empty place for my sister. So we're going to try it again, but she was just jazzed about the idea and was disappointed that we're going to have to postpone it. But that's another way to connect with family. And I'll be the first to say this is not new. Everybody's FaceTiming their family members, but for me, it is something new. And translating a voice on the phone to a voice and a picture and actually engaging with people that way is it's a great way to feel more connected without tipping my hand on. Do what now?
Oh, no. Tony, so maybe we could pivot to, some of the things that you're seeing around leadership, and I'll try to bring up the slide. I don't know what's going on here. And then we have some questions from the audience that are coming in that I'd like to do. But while I'm trying to bring this up,
Go ahead. So I did love, and I'm looking at the chats coming in, and I think Kay, I don't know who Kay is exactly, but I loved what Kay said. She said, or he, not everybody's visual. Further, nonverbal connection for me requires the person being in the same room where one can see the twitch in the face. Remote is fine and should be continued in the future, as should meeting in place, meeting in person and physically. And Kay, I could not agree with you more. Unfortunately now I don't know about you guys, but we're at like April 30th. So for the next 30 days, we've gotten a bit of choice taken away. So when we work remotely, there's an interesting metric, and Heidi will work on finding it. But one of the things that I'm fascinated by is by a new book that is written by Karen Sobel-Lejeski. And those of you that are scholars of leadership in a remote work model, I highly encourage reading it. And one of the things that I love that Karen talks about there you go, Heidi, good job, is 3 measurements. Now, those of us in IAOP know it's all about metrics and KPIs, and that measures kind of what we do and how we do it. So in the world of remote, we're going to have to learn how to work and lead in completely different ways. And what Karen came up with, which I think is fascinating, is that there's 3 metrics that determine what she has coined virtual distance. So let me take you through the three, and then we can have dialogue and Q&A. But the first is physical, and that just makes sense. It's time zones, it's brick and mortar, it's being in the same room. Kay, back to your point, it's seeing that twitch, which is, by the way, another reason for video first. It's being in the same kind of environment. I think it's why Zoom suddenly started changing background screens, right? It's that physical presence. The second is operational. And so, Mary, you mentioned, gosh, Skype and GoToMeeting and WebEx and Zooms, and that's what we did, and we interleaved between all of those tools, technologies. Microsoft Teams and Slack has us chatting, and so all of those tools came. But operationally, how are you going to lead and manage in a remote world? And I like to say dailies, weeklies, monthlies, quarterlies. So if you're a team leader, or if you're a CEO, or if you're somebody that is in a leadership position, by the way, all of us are in a remote world, how are you going to change the rhythm of the business so you stay somewhat connected to your team, to what's going on with the new merger? Congratulations, by the way, Mary, right? How do you do this in a new world? Daily, weekly, monthly? How do you get state of the business out, etc.? And then the third that I thought Karen spoke to beautifully is two big things on affinity. Affinity means, am I connected to the brand? And am I connected to my team? So that's what's lacking. And if we go remote and we don't use a lot of ingenuity, contextual tools, and video, we're going to lose attachment to brand and to people. And what I mean by that is, I thought it fascinating, Mary, that you are wearing your brand of your company. Now, by the way, I didn't know, but you verbalizing that. Affinity is attachment to brand. So we ought to be staring at, and by the way, IOP and VXI have done this beautifully, because when I look at that screen, I look at IOP and VXI. I'm getting attachment to brand. And when you're selling to clients, you want their logo there because you want attachment to the connection between the brand. And then we also need connection to one another. I'll give you a good backstory, and then I think we can maybe open it for questions. But a friend of mine's daughter just got hired. She went through 7 interviews. She went through getting hired. She went through getting trained. She's a vice president in a company, and she's never met a person.
Wow.
And that was pre-coronavirus. Now, talent acquisition for remote work opens up the world, but we've got to learn how to do talent acquisition and performance management and recognition and rewarding in a very different way. So physical operational affinity, and I will contend, and Karen writes about it in her book, that you can have high visual distance, virtual distance, and work down the hall from somebody, right?
You know, I love this concept.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I love this concept of around the whole recruiting component of it, because I think companies that have been able to successfully adapt to this new remote working environment, it does open up whole new channels of recruitment. And IAOP, as y'all know, is very big on impact sourcing and targeting individuals from marginalized communities, right? So veterans or able-bodied individuals. And I'd love to hear both Mary and Tony's opinion on this, but I think this demonstrating that you can run your business remote will then open up avenues for other types of individuals that maybe we wouldn't have hired in the past. What do you think?
Mary, I'll let you go and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the leveraging technology in a purposeful I think will help. Just because we have the technology doesn't mean we always use it. And so we have to feel like we're fairly purposeful about it. I find it ironic if anybody tunes into, I think it's Nick at Night or Cartoon Channel, and they took a look at the Jetsons, which I think was from 1965 or something like that. Everything was done with a not just a telephone, but they were looking at the individual, and that was a long time ago. And so the power of connection and using that visual to help establish that a deeper, more meaningful connection, I think was not lost because it was so long ago. It's important then, it's important now more than ever. I love the fact that we can hire folks. I found it interesting, Tony, that your colleague went through so many interviews and got hired and never met, which to me, having negotiated for so long, we used our model, bring them in, bring your jammies, wear your all-day Pampers, you're not getting out of the room until we finish negotiating. And then we were forced to do everything remotely, but it was phone only. And so I think the big opportunity for me is not only leading virtually with physical or the visual connection, but also as well. That's a strong relation.
Yeah, you're going a little bit in and out, Mary, but Tony, do you want to give a quick perception on that, and then we can open up for questions?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some of the chats coming in, so you guys fill up the chat channel. But
yeah,
I think you're right, and I love this construct of accommodation. So it opens up the world. This started, by the way, and I think most of you know this, but it started in Seattle, Washington, for a whole bunch of reasons. But they now offer literally tax credits for remote work. In addition to that, the EEOC has made people that telecommute, they call it, the EEOC has made telecommuting what's called a reasonable accommodation. So those of you in HR know about this, and that means that you actually get incentives to hire people that have reasonable accommodation. The other thing that I kind of like, and I heard this backstory and I think it's fascinating, is that the carbon footprint is literally changing in the last 3 weeks. A colleague of mine in LA said he has never seen the sky so clear. He's never seen, because everybody's at home, they're not on the freeways, they're not filling up, right, our carbon footprint. So Boston has followed now. Boston has followed with tax credits, and I think we're going to see increased government giving aid to remote work because it's good for our planet. So I think talent acquisition is interesting, Heidi. And I also think we've got to really think about this environment. I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a video over China, and it looked at the air quality of China post-coronavirus. And I hate to say that there's a silver lining in every cloud, but man, it was discriminatingly discernible. So,
it's so interesting you say that, because I just
Yeah,
saw a
same with
picture
India.
that somebody shared with me yesterday about Los Angeles, and they took a pre-coronavirus and post-coronavirus picture, and the air quality was remarkable. I mean, the difference. And I've seen things, I don't know if it's real, but animals are reappearing. So maybe there is a little bit of a silver lining. And yet, we have in our screen, Kay, mentions here that, her comment or his experts say that things that are proven wrong in a few years, and, that we're not closer now, that's disappointing, right? So what are your thoughts on that? So, is this really bringing us closer?
Oh, I think time is the truest test of, you know, we're what, 3 weeks or 4 weeks if you're overseas. But I think we haven't begun to learn. The thing that I love, and Heidi, you started with it, is the resiliency of the human spirit.
Yeah.
And so I think attitudinally, and that's why I go back to what Karen said. Attitudinally, we are going to have to change the way we work, think, and lead. And I think having a cognition about this sense of connecting to people, an alarming statistic, and that's going to happen with or without coronavirus, is by 2025, 40% of the workforce is going to be Gen Z and younger. So get your brain around that. In fact, now they've got the new coin of the new babies being born are Gen C for coronavirus, which is kind of
Oh dear.
Oh, wow.
I just read that in the Atlantic. But Gen Z and younger, 40% of the workforce in 5 years. So I hate to say that we're in the same kind of like age group here, guys, but I think that what's happening is the millennials, Gen Zers, they are very, very remote world centric. They are very comfortable Snapchat, right? They do FaceTime. They like video first because that's the way they get to know their friends, unfortunately, because they don't keep their eyes up and look at people the way Kay said. And so I think this is the new evolution. However, if we go back to what Karen said, they're not loyal. So if I'm not attached to my team, and if I'm not attached to my brand, guess what happens? Attrition. And when attrition happens, here's the data, and I was shocked. The average tenure in 2019, last year, average tenure in corporate America was 3.4 years, and Gen Z was 2. Gen Z and below. So
Wow.
by the time you hire them, train them, and get some kind of ROI. So Mary, right, Heidi, I mean, we're loyal, right? We've worked for companies for 17 years and 9 years and 10, right? The new norm is we better figure out ways to lead and manage and create an affinity to brand and to team so that you can retain top talent and nurture and grow that into the leaders of the future.
Yeah, and
we're going to be led by avatars, and we're going to be in Second Life, and we're going to be, you know, sort of dehumanized. So that's another reason I love that Karen talked about that affinity, that connection, and then the new operational cadence that says, take time to have a tea party, take time to go into the bar and have a drink, right? And if we have to do it virtually, let's create an environment. By the way, that's what we do at Walkabout, so go check us out.
Little plug.
Commercial, but that's what I think we've got to do, is create the environment for people to not only survive, but to thrive.
And we found, even in the, you know, as we pivot from, you know, brick and mortar in the contact center to remote working environments, which is what we've had to do for our clients very quickly, to be able to continue to support them, that this concept of video and engagement is really important, particularly between teams, right? Supervisory teams, QA teams, and the, you know, agents on the phone. And do you see, Mary and Tony, that business will never be the same, right? I mean, we will never go back to the way that we did business, right? So I think it's really looking forward of how we optimize this new environment that we're in, and remote work at home. It's here to stay, right? It was here before, but it is much bigger now. So do you see, Tony and Mary, that they're, with video and, you know, being able to reinvent the way we engage, that that will have a correlation to, you know, improving retention of employees?
So I'll go to the data because I really like data. And Karen was writing this way before coronavirus. So again, virtual distance as a measurement, physical, operational, and affinity can be high, and you can work down the hall from someone. So it's all about how do you engage as a company, as a team, and as individuals. So Heidi, I loved what one of your analogies. I think we're going to have to rethink training. I think we're going to have to rethink QA feedback. And by the way, I think this is all a good thing, because if we'll put the people back into the equation, I get a little jaundiced with this psychometric evaluation of whether I should hire you because of the way you answered a survey. And then on QA, I've got machines scoring your everything. And the machine is actually giving you feedback, or you're getting feedback in a piece of paper. I think we've got to put the person back in the job. I think if we're going to be remote, we need to figure out new ways to connect teams to companies and individuals to teams. And I think that's our collective challenge. I think it's IOPs. I love that you guys are focusing on the commerce of communication, at connecting. If we don't connect, we are going to be relegated to just being a number, or just being an executor, or just being just being a negotiator, Mary, without feeling, or, you know, Goldberg wrote about emotional intelligence when 15, 20 years ago. If we're not careful in a remote world, we'll lose the ability to add that emotional intelligence into everything we do as leaders and as employees. So that's how I feel, Heidi.
That's brilliant. Bogdan asked, well, he or she was very interested in learning more about the Stanford MediaX study. Maybe you could just touch a little bit more on that. And then we're getting a lot of requests for us to send out links to some of these studies and some of the data that you're highlighting. And so what I think we'll do, Mary and Tony, is group afterwards and pull together some links so that we can send it to all the attendees.
I agree. If we could just kind of put it in a packet, if you will, and then have that available, not only to the attendees, but on the IAOP website.
That would be great. So Tony, back to Stanford and, you know, some of that data.
So I'm gonna sound like a tad ignorant, and I don't know if somebody can unmute, but I have no idea what the Stanford MediaX study is. So I'm sorry. Maybe somebody's better than I. I will tell you, there's if you guys haven't read it, there is a very interesting, it's the only empirical data study that I've seen for call center, and it was done by Harvard Business Review, and I'm happy to send you the links on this. And here's what they did. They had 180 agents in C-Trip, I think you guys know, is a big online travel agent like Expedia call center in China. So they're owned by Shiji, which is a big China company. So C-Trip knew that they needed to have remote work and work from home. So they did a pilot, and they did it for 9 months. And they sent, out of 180 agents, control group, treatment group, they sent 90 agents home. And they did that for 9 months. After 9 months, they mined the data, and the data was overwhelming. Number one, they saved in brick and mortar, and that's only logical. $1,900 a person, because they didn't have that brick and mortar. The second, though, and get your brains around this, y'all, the agents that went home took 13.5% more calls. Now, if you guys are into call center stuff, that's almost an agent's worth of work a day that they picked up. So they were like, oh my gosh, and this is empirical, and this is Harvard Business Review, and it's the only A/B test that I've seen that accurately kind of controlled the variables. Here was the downside. The downside of the people that work from home said, I feel two things. One is I feel isolated from my company and my team. The second is they had a sense, a feeling that the people that worked on site got promoted more. And guess what? The data proved that they did. Because people, and I don't know if there's a direct correlation because you can't tell, but they felt people that worked on site, those 90, got promoted more, and they did. The other thing that I thought was fascinating, and that goes back to this, are you present, is that most of them, when they went home to mom and dad's bedroom, their bedroom at mom and dad's house. And that's where a lot of your employees are going home to right now. So I think that's another, Heidi, piece of data that kind of says, wow, this is really interesting. You can pick up productivity, but people aren't machines and they need to be treated like people. So that's the, and I'm happy to send the link to that. And maybe someone out there does know this Stanford study. Stanford Media.
Yeah, I think what they said, Tony, is, and I'm trying to, it's around the information that was on one of the slides that talks about 1 in 5 people did not meet their supervisor.
Oh, yeah. I can get the source on that. Duh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even, yeah. 1 in 5 will not meet their boss. Yes, I can definitely get the source on that. Definitely. Isn't that great? And that was pre-coronavirus, y'all. And that was probably 2 years old.
And so let's talk about leadership a little bit. Mary, how, if at all, have you modified your leadership style or changed the way you manage your team now that you're not having people line up at your door and you're not, having meeting in the lunchroom necessarily, although Walkabout can do that. But
Well,
little plug. But have you grasped modifications?
If I'm doing okay or not, my first inclination of having to be forced to work remote was that I wanted to let my team know that I was there for them. So I sent an e-card to them, and Sprint has various e-cards that are branded, and then I also took up paid for a subscription to Hallmark e-cards because Hallmark is the hometown company, and so you got to support local. And I found myself wanting to just connect in different ways. There was someone had made the comment, well, what if you're more visual, or what if you're not visual? And so some people like to have something that they can look at again and again. So telling something to somebody as well as sending them something, I'm looking for different ways of connecting with my team on an individual basis as people, not as just members of a team, because I genuinely care about them. And so I won't get it right out of the chute. It's a learning process. This is a journey. It's a journey that every leader will need to take, because in order to lead, you have to stay engaged with the team and understand that everybody has a different way that they want to either be recognized or to communicate with. So I guess the real test is going to be to see what the team's response is. But I'm trying to think a little bit more broadly instead of just picking up the phone or sending an email or even just doing a Skype, just doing something on the personal level. And then we're also part of a design thinking cadre of folks, and the IAOP Outsourcing World Summit in February, we had a 2-hour design thinking workshop. And what I liked about that was the fact that we collaborated with very different backgrounds of people. And so our next big challenge is how do we simulate that collaboration, but with a physical distance rather, because usually everybody has their own little sticky notes and they put them up on the wall. So as a team, we're trying to figure that one out too. There's a group of people who are in the design thinking area at Sprint, and we just had meetings about that yesterday. So part of being a leader is collaborating. No one of us is smarter than all of us, and it takes a lot of great ideas, to have a good idea. So that's what I'm doing on a personal level as well as professional level.
Yeah, and Heidi, I would add, I think there's lots of cool little point solutions out. There's some, and by the way, I think this is going to rise to great inventions, but like a mural or a Miro are whiteboarding tools. So if you're in one of these collaboration sessions, Mary, using a whiteboarding tool that that approximates in that session. I also love, Mary, what you said. I'll go back to my neuroscience background, which is we all learn differently: verbal, visual, kinesthetic, and auditory. So when you're with your team, what you've got to, and I loved what Kay said too, there are all these learning styles, and whatever our predominant learning style is, it's the way we will teach and lead. We can't help it because it's the way our brain is wired. So if I'm verbal, I'm going to be teaching, training, talking, verbal, and Heidi's going to be, I don't get it. Show me a slide. And then Mary's going to say, I don't really get it. I've got to learn by doing. I've got to be immersed in this. And so I think that's the other recognition, is that we all are different. We're all remarkably unique. I loved what you just said, Mary, about, you know, the power of co-creation. And I really think it goes well beyond collaboration to co-creation. And we're going to have to learn how to use that. I also did see a great question, and I think right now it's really important. And it says, how do you handle sensitive information in a remote environment? So I will tell you, there's, you know, it's the same way we've always done it with VPNs and firewalls. So I think we've got to be careful with that. But I also think, you know, the news on Zoom with a hacker with porn, you know, that's kind of like, whoa. We've got to think differently about what we say, how we say it, and what gets documented. So what's encrypted end to end? Video recording, video recording verbal, you better have it scripted, because a good lawyer is going to say, I'm a publicly traded company and I don't need you saying that, right? I certainly don't need you saying that and capturing it. So a lot of stuff that we say in meetings, you know, if you've ever been on a board of directors, right, there are certain things that you say in meetings, and there are certain things that go into the minutes. And so I think in a remote world, and I don't know who asked the question, but that is a very good question. If I go back to physical, operational, and affinity, on that operational side, I need to better communicate what gets encrypted, what gets verbalized, who's taking notes, what they put in the notes, because we're into an entirely new ball game on what could be subpoenaed. And in co-creation in a public company, you want to create in private, and then you want to come out with positioning in public. So I think we're in for a very interesting set of new emerging technologies that have got to take care of PCI, GDPR, the right to be known, the right to be forgotten, the right to be, are we going to introduce bias in our communication? So I just think we're gonna learn a ton.
Well, I want to think this was one of the fastest hours for me, and really enjoyed this conversation. I, for one, know I learned a lot, and I hope our participants did as well. I want to just thank Tony and Mary again for joining us today and for your incredible insight, and Debbie and the whole IAOP team for working with VXI to put this together. As Debbie mentioned at the beginning, this is going to be a first in a series, and now we're going to start getting a little more micro in terms of looking at the 3 components, physical, operational, and affinity, and tackling those things specifically in our future webinars. So Debbie, I'll turn it over to you quickly to wrap things up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, ladies. That was fabulous, and it did go really quickly. We will have this uploaded probably by tomorrow, I think, in our on our resource page that I talked about earlier, and also in our Knowledge Center. So if you want to listen to it again or share it with someone, go ahead and do that. And please watch your email, watch social media. We will be promoting the next series of these, and so you don't want to miss that. So you can just go ahead and register as soon as you see that come across. Then I guess the only other thing I want to say is stay safe, stay healthy, and let us know if you want to get involved, if you've got ideas for something you'd like to hear. Our members are really, really coming together to help each other. So, please take advantage of that, and see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. You have a good day.